Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that an organization is migrating several cloud-based applications and needs to implement a secure and efficient method for users to access these resources without repeatedly entering credentials. The IT security team is evaluating different SAML, security assertion markup language, configurations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with modern security best practices and facilitates robust identity management for federated access? Option A. Implement SAML for single sign-on but forego multi-factor authentication at the identity provider level to streamline the user login experience. Option B. Establish a single, trusted identity provider (IDP) and configure all service providers (SB) to rely on assertions from this IDP, ensuring assertions are encrypted during transit. Option C. Permit each cloud application service provider to manage its own independent SAML identity store and authentication process. Option D. Configure SAML to transmit assertions between the identity provider and service providers in plain text to simplify integration. The correct answer is B. Establish a single trusted identity provider (IDP) and configure all service providers (SB) to rely on assertions from this IDP, ensuring assertions are encrypted during transit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in modern IT environments where federated identity management is crucial for seamless and secure access to cloud applications. The professional must balance the need for efficient user access with robust security controls and compliance with identity management best practices. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate SAML configuration that aligns with the organization's security posture and regulatory obligations, without compromising user experience or introducing vulnerabilities. Correct approach analysis. Implementing SAML with a trusted identity provider (IDP) and configuring service providers (SB) to rely on assertions from this IDP represents best professional practice. This approach leverages a centralized and well-managed identity source, which is fundamental to effective identity and access management. By establishing trust between the IDP and SBs, the organization ensures that authentication decisions are made by a single, authoritative source. This simplifies user management, enhances security by centralizing authentication policies, and facilitates auditing. From a compliance perspective, this aligns with principles of least privilege and centralized control, often implicitly or explicitly required by various compliance frameworks that emphasize strong identity governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Allowing each service provider to manage its own independent SAML identity store creates a fragmented and insecure identity landscape. This approach violates the principle of centralized identity management, leading to inconsistent security policies, duplicated user credentials, and increased administrative overhead. It significantly increases the attack surface, as each SB becomes a potential point of compromise. From a regulatory standpoint, this lack of centralized control makes it difficult to demonstrate compliance with identity assurance requirements and audit user access effectively. Configuring SAML to allow unencrypted assertions between the IDP and SBs introduces a critical security vulnerability. SAML assertions contain sensitive user identity information, and transmitting them in plain text makes them susceptible to interception and tampering by malicious actors. This directly contravenes security best practices and would likely violate data protection regulations that mandate the confidentiality and integrity of personal data during transmission. Implementing SAML without any form of multi-factor authentication (MFA) for user logins, even if the SAML assertion itself is valid, weakens the overall security posture. While SAML handles the federation of identity, the initial authentication at the IDP is the primary defense against unauthorized access. Relying solely on passwords for authentication at the IDP is a known security risk and is increasingly considered insufficient by modern security standards and regulatory guidance for protecting sensitive resources. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach SAML configuration by first understanding the organization's identity management strategy and its risk tolerance. The decision-making framework should prioritize a centralized IDP model for consistency and control. Security considerations, such as the need for encryption and the implementation of MFA, should be non-negotiable. Compliance requirements should be mapped to the chosen SAML architecture to ensure that all regulatory obligations related to identity assurance, data protection, and access control are met. This involves a thorough risk assessment of each configuration option against established security principles and relevant regulatory mandates. Question 2. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to disaster recovery. A financial services organization operating under strict regulatory oversight in the United States is developing its disaster recovery plan. The primary objective is to ensure business continuity and protect sensitive customer data in the event of a significant disruption. Considering the organization's critical systems, varying levels of business impact, and budget constraints, which of the following disaster recovery implementation strategies would be considered the most professionally sound and compliant? Option A. Select the disaster recovery solution with the lowest upfront cost, focusing primarily on minimizing immediate expenditure, even if it means compromising on the speed or completeness of recovery for certain essential services. Option B. Implement a phased approach, prioritizing the recovery of critical business systems based on their recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, and gradually expanding disaster recovery capabilities to less critical systems over time. Option C. Design a disaster recovery plan that relies exclusively on manual backup restoration and documentation, with no automated failover or recovery mechanisms, to reduce reliance on complex technology. Option D. Deploy a full-scale disaster recovery solution that covers all organizational systems simultaneously, ensuring maximum redundancy and immediate recovery for every application, irrespective of its criticality or cost. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased approach, prioritizing the recovery of critical business systems based on their recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, and gradually expanding disaster recovery capabilities to less critical systems over time. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in disaster recovery planning, balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term strategic goal of resilience. The professional is tasked with selecting a disaster recovery strategy that not only addresses immediate threats, but also aligns with the organization's overall risk appetite and regulatory obligations. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant approach among several plausible options, each with its own implications for cost, complexity, and recovery time. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased implementation of disaster recovery capabilities, starting with critical systems and gradually expanding to less critical ones. This strategy is professionally sound because it aligns with the principle of prioritizing business impact. By focusing on recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, for the most vital business functions first, the organization ensures that its core operations can resume quickly after a disruptive event. This phased approach also allows for iterative testing and refinement of the disaster recovery plan, leading to a more robust and cost-effective solution over time. From a regulatory perspective, this demonstrates a commitment to due diligence in protecting sensitive data and ensuring service availability, which is often a requirement under various compliance frameworks relevant to the Microsoft Certified Security, Compliance, and Identity Fundamentals exam, such as those pertaining to data protection and business continuity. Correct approaches analysis. Implementing a full-scale disaster recovery solution for all systems simultaneously, regardless of criticality, is professionally unsound. This approach is often prohibitively expensive and resource-intensive, leading to potential budget overruns and inefficient allocation of resources. It fails to acknowledge the varying business impacts of system downtime and can lead to a boil-the-ocean mentality, which is rarely successful. From a regulatory standpoint, while comprehensive coverage might seem ideal, it can also indicate a lack of risk assessment and prioritization, which is a fundamental aspect of compliance. Focusing solely on the cheapest available disaster recovery solution without considering its effectiveness or alignment with RTOS/RPOs is also professionally unacceptable. Cost should be a factor, but it should not be the sole determinant. A cheap solution that cannot meet recovery objectives is effectively useless and represents a failure in due diligence. This approach could lead to significant financial and reputational damage if a disaster occurs and the recovery capabilities are inadequate, potentially violating regulatory requirements for data integrity and availability. Adopting a disaster recovery strategy that relies solely on manual intervention and documentation without automated failover or recovery mechanisms is generally not best practice for modern organizations. While manual processes can be part of a DR plan, over-reliance on them for critical systems increases the risk of human error, delays recovery times significantly, and is unlikely to meet stringent RTOs. This can be seen as a failure to implement appropriate technical controls to mitigate risks, which is a cornerstone of security and compliance frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach disaster recovery planning by first conducting a thorough business impact analysis, BIA, to identify critical business functions and their associated RTOs and RPOs. This analysis informs the prioritization of systems and data for recovery. Subsequently, a risk assessment should be performed to understand potential threats and vulnerabilities. Based on the BIA and risk assessment, a phased strategy should be developed, focusing on implementing recovery solutions for the most critical systems first, with a plan to expand coverage over time. Regular testing, documentation, and training are essential to ensure the plan's effectiveness and compliance with relevant regulations. Question 3. The performance metrics show a significant increase in user engagement with a new cloud-based customer relationship management (CRM) service, but internal audits have flagged potential gaps in data handling practices. Given the organization operates under U.S. regulatory frameworks governing data privacy and security, which of the following actions is the most appropriate to ensure ongoing compliance and mitigate risk? Option A. Deploy the CRM service with a plan to address any identified compliance issues in subsequent updates, focusing on immediate user needs. Option B. Proceed with the full deployment of the CRM service and schedule a compliance review for the next fiscal quarter, prioritizing feature delivery. Option C. Continue the full deployment of the CRM service, assuming the cloud provider's compliance certifications cover all necessary regulatory requirements for data handling. Option D. Immediately halt the deployment of the new CRM service and initiate a comprehensive review of its data handling capabilities against all applicable U.S. data privacy and security regulations. Correct answer is D. Immediately halt the deployment of the new CRM service and initiate a comprehensive review of its data handling capabilities against all applicable U.S. data privacy and security regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud security and compliance, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks. The pressure to innovate and deliver features quickly can lead to shortcuts or a lack of thorough vetting, potentially exposing the organization to significant risks. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that security and compliance are not treated as afterthoughts, but are integrated into the development lifecycle from the outset, even under time constraints. This requires a proactive and informed approach to risk management and a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the new service against the relevant regulatory framework, specifically focusing on data protection, access controls, and audit logging requirements as mandated by U.S. regulations applicable to cloud services. This aligns with the principles of privacy by design and security by design, which are foundational to compliance in the U.S. By engaging the compliance team early and ensuring the service meets these requirements before deployment, the organization mitigates the risk of noncompliance, potential data breaches, and subsequent regulatory penalties. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to responsible data handling and adherence to legal obligations, which is best professional practice. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying the service without a formal compliance review, assuming existing controls are sufficient, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established governance processes and creates a blind spot regarding potential noncompliance with U.S. data protection laws. This approach risks unauthorized access to sensitive data, inadequate data retention, or improper data disposal, all of which can lead to severe penalties and reputational damage. Implementing the service with a plan to address compliance issues post-deployment is also a failure. This move fast and break things mentality, while sometimes applicable in purely technical contexts, is unacceptable when dealing with regulated data. It demonstrates a disregard for legal obligations and places the organization in a precarious position, potentially violating U.S. regulations from the moment of deployment. The ethical failure lies in knowingly operating in a non-compliant state. Relying solely on the cloud provider's compliance certifications without performing an independent assessment is another pitfall. While cloud provider certifications are important, they do not absolve the customer of their own responsibility to ensure their specific implementation and use of the service meet regulatory requirements. The organization remains accountable for how it configures and utilizes the cloud service, and failing to verify this can lead to violations of U.S. compliance mandates. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to compliance. This involves understanding the data being processed, the applicable regulatory frameworks, in this case, U.S. regulations, and the potential impact of non-compliance. Before deploying any new service, especially one handling sensitive information, a thorough assessment should be conducted. This assessment should involve relevant stakeholders, including security, compliance, legal, and the development team. The process should prioritize identifying and mitigating compliance risks early in the lifecycle. If time is a constraint, a phased approach to deployment with clear milestones for compliance validation should be established, rather than skipping the review entirely. Question 4. The assessment process reveals that several IT administrators have been granted permanent, broad administrative privileges across critical production servers to expedite troubleshooting and system maintenance. While this has historically been perceived as efficient, recent security audits have highlighted significant risks associated with this practice. The organization needs to implement a more secure and compliant method for managing privileged access. Option A. Grant all IT administrators read-only access to production servers and require them to submit formal change requests for any administrative actions, which will be approved by a single senior manager. Option B. Continue with the current practice of granting permanent broad administrative privileges, but increase the frequency of manual security awareness training for administrators. Option C. Remove all administrative privileges from IT administrators and rely on a third-party managed service provider to perform all system maintenance and troubleshooting tasks. Option D. Implement a privileged access management (PAM) solution that enforces just-in-time access, requires multi-factor authentication for all privileged sessions, and provides automated credential rotation and session recording. The correct answer is D. Implement a privileged access management (PAM) solution that enforces just-in-time access, requires multi-factor authentication for all privileged sessions, and provides automated credential rotation and session recording. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in organizations, balancing the need for efficient access to critical systems with robust security controls. In the context of privileged access management (PAM), this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk, operational impact, and regulatory compliance. The goal is to prevent unauthorized access and misuse of privileged accounts, which are prime targets for attackers, without unduly hindering legitimate administrative tasks. Careful judgment is required to implement controls that are effective, auditable, and user-friendly. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of least privilege and just-in-time access, which are foundational to modern security frameworks. By implementing a PAM solution that enforces granular permissions, requires multi-factor authentication for privileged sessions, and logs all privileged activities, an organization significantly reduces its attack surface. This approach is also crucial for meeting compliance requirements, as it provides the necessary audit trails to demonstrate control over sensitive systems. The focus on automated credential rotation and session recording further enhances security and accountability, making it easier to investigate potential breaches. An incorrect approach that grants broad, standing privileged access without sufficient oversight is professionally unacceptable. This fails to adhere to the principle of least privilege, creating an unnecessary risk of privilege escalation and unauthorized access. It also undermines auditability, making it difficult to track who did what and when, which is a common regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on manual approval processes for privileged access, without automated controls or session monitoring, is inefficient and prone to human error or circumvention. This can lead to delays in critical operations and a false sense of security, while still leaving significant security gaps. A third incorrect approach that neglects regular review and recertification of privileged access rights creates a situation where dormant or unnecessary privileges persist, increasing the risk of misuse over time. This lack of ongoing governance is a direct contravention of best practices for identity and access management, and can lead to compliance issues. Professionals should approach such situations by first conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify critical assets and the privileged access required to manage them. This should be followed by designing and implementing a PAM strategy that incorporates the principles of least privilege, just-in-time access, and continuous monitoring. Regular audits and reviews of privileged access policies and their implementation are essential to adapt to evolving threats and organizational needs. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that when implementing digital record-keeping solutions, an organization needs to ensure the integrity and immutability of timestamps. Which of the following approaches best satisfies these requirements for regulatory compliance and non-repudiation? Option A. Utilizing a trusted, independent timestamping authority, SA, that provides cryptographically secured timestamps. Option B. Using timestamps embedded directly within application-specific logs without external validation. Option C. Relying on the timestamps generated by the client's operating system clock. Option D. Implementing a private, internal timestamping service managed solely by the organization's IT department. The correct answer is A. Utilizing a trusted, independent timestamping authority, SA, that provides cryptographically secured timestamps. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that understanding the nuances of timestamping services is critical for maintaining data integrity and compliance within the Microsoft Certified Security, Compliance, and Identity Fundamentals framework. This scenario is professionally challenging because organizations often grapple with selecting the most appropriate timestamping method to meet diverse regulatory and operational needs, particularly when dealing with sensitive data or legal requirements. The choice impacts the trustworthiness and legal admissibility of digital records. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it leverages a trusted, independent timestamping authority, SA. This aligns with the principles of non-repudiation and integrity, which are fundamental to many compliance frameworks. A TSA provides an immutable record of when a document or data existed, preventing disputes about its creation or modification time. This is crucial for audit trails, legal discovery, and regulatory reporting, ensuring that the timestamps themselves are reliable and have not been tampered with by the data owner. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the client system clock for timestamping is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet regulatory requirements because client system clocks are easily manipulated and lack the inherent trustworthiness of an independent TSA. This creates a significant regulatory and ethical failure by undermining the integrity of the timestamp, making it impossible to prove the exact time of an event or document creation to auditors or legal bodies. It also violates the principle of non-repudiation, as the data owner could falsely claim a document existed at an earlier time. Another incorrect approach that uses a private, internal timestamping service without independent verification is also professionally unacceptable. While it might offer some level of internal control, it lacks the external validation necessary for true trustworthiness and legal admissibility. This poses a regulatory risk because such timestamps are not recognized as authoritative by many legal jurisdictions or compliance standards. Ethically, it can be seen as an attempt to create a self-serving record that may not withstand external scrutiny, potentially misleading stakeholders or regulators. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of the data's sensitivity. The applicable regulatory requirements, e.g., GDPR, HIPAA if applicable within the exam scope, though the exam focuses on general principles, and the need for external validation. Professionals should prioritize solutions that offer independent verification and a strong audit trail, consulting with legal and compliance teams to ensure the chosen timestamping method meets all necessary standards for integrity and non-repudiation. Question 6. Market research demonstrates that a company is experiencing rapid growth, leading to an increased volume of customer data being collected and processed across various departments. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is concerned about ensuring that these data handling practices align with the principles of data protection and privacy, mandated by relevant regulatory frameworks. The CISO needs to advise the executive team on the most appropriate course of action to maintain compliance while supporting business operations. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive data inventory and mapping exercise to identify all personal data being processed, understand the purposes and legal basis for processing, and implement appropriate technical and organizational safeguards, including pseudonymization where feasible, to align with regulatory requirements. Option B. Implement advanced encryption technologies on all data storage systems without first assessing the legal basis for processing or the specific data protection obligations. Option C. Immediately halt all data processing activities across the organization until a full review of all systems and processes can be completed to avoid any potential noncompliance. Option D. Continue current data processing practices as they have not led to any reported breaches, assuming that existing measures are sufficient to meet regulatory expectations. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive data inventory and mapping exercise to identify all personal data being processed, understand the purposes and legal basis for processing, and implement appropriate technical and organizational safeguards, including pseudonymization where feasible, to align with regulatory requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for business operations with the imperative to comply with stringent data protection regulations. The challenge lies in understanding the scope of the regulations and applying them to a practical, albeit hypothetical, situation involving sensitive customer data. The organization must make a judgment call on how to proceed without compromising either its operational continuity or its legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the data processing activities against the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. This means identifying what constitutes personal data, understanding the legal basis for processing it, and ensuring appropriate security measures are in place. For organizations operating under frameworks like GDPR, which is a common reference point for the security, compliance, and identity fundamentals exam, implying a focus on data protection principles applicable globally, though specific exam jurisdiction might narrow this. This would involve principles such as data minimization, purpose limitation, and accountability. Implementing pseudonymization techniques where feasible, conducting a data protection impact assessment (DPIA) for high-risk processing, and ensuring robust access controls are all best practices that align with regulatory expectations for protecting personal data. This approach demonstrates a proactive and compliant stance, prioritizing the rights and freedoms of individuals whose data is being processed. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing to process all data without any review or modification is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It disregards the fundamental principles of data protection, such as the need for a legal basis for processing and the requirement to protect data from unauthorized access or disclosure. This approach risks substantial fines and reputational damage. Implementing a blanket ban on all data processing activities, even those that are essential for business operations and have a legitimate legal basis, is also an incorrect approach. While it might seem like a safe option from a compliance perspective, it fails to acknowledge that regulations often permit data processing under specific conditions. This approach can lead to operational paralysis and is not a proportionate response to regulatory requirements. It also fails to demonstrate due diligence in understanding the nuances of the law. Focusing solely on technical security measures without considering the legal basis for data processing or the rights of data subjects is incomplete. While technical controls are crucial, they are only one part of a comprehensive compliance strategy. Regulations require more than just secure systems. They demand a lawful and ethical approach to data handling throughout its lifecycle. This approach overlooks the broader compliance obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based and principles-driven approach. This involves first understanding the specific regulatory obligations applicable to their operations. Then, they should conduct a comprehensive inventory and mapping of data processing activities, identifying the types of data involved, the purposes of processing, and the legal basis for each activity. Based on this understanding, they should implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure compliance, including security controls, access management, and data minimization strategies. Regular reviews and audits are essential to maintain compliance and adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern regarding the integrity and accessibility of historical financial transaction data for audit purposes. The organization operates under U.S. regulations that mandate the retention of immutable records for a minimum of 7 years. Which of the following strategies best addresses this concern while adhering to regulatory requirements? Option A. Implement a cloud-based object storage solution configured with object lock capabilities, setting a retention period that exceeds the 7-year regulatory requirement. Option B. Utilize a cost-effective, high-density on-premises storage array for all historical data with manual deletion protocols after 5 years. Option C. Store all historical financial transaction data in a readily accessible but easily modifiable database for quick retrieval. Option D. Rely on standard cloud storage with regular backups, assuming that backups will preserve historical data for audit purposes. The correct answer is A. Implement a cloud-based object storage solution configured with object lock capabilities, setting a retention period that exceeds the 7-year regulatory requirement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between data retention requirements for compliance and the operational need for efficient storage management. Organizations must balance the imperative to preserve data for regulatory scrutiny with the costs and complexities of storing vast amounts of information indefinitely. Careful judgment is required to select storage solutions that meet both legal obligations and business objectives without introducing undue risk or expense. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core requirement of immutability for compliance purposes. By implementing a solution that prevents data modification or deletion for a specified period, it ensures that audit trails and records remain intact and tamper-proof, directly satisfying regulatory mandates. This proactive measure minimizes the risk of non-compliance penalties and supports a robust security posture by preserving evidence. An incorrect approach that relies solely on standard cloud storage without specific immutability features fails to meet regulatory requirements for data integrity and retention. This could lead to accidental or intentional data alteration or deletion, rendering records unreliable for audits and potentially resulting in significant legal and financial repercussions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings by using less secure or less durable storage methods for compliance data introduces a high risk of data loss or corruption, which is unacceptable for regulatory purposes. Finally, an approach that neglects to document or enforce retention policies for immutable storage creates a gap in governance, undermining the very purpose of implementing such a solution and leaving the organization vulnerable to compliance failures. Professionals should approach this decision by first thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory requirements for data retention and immutability within their operating jurisdiction. This involves identifying applicable laws and industry standards. Next, they should assess the organization's data lifecycle management needs and risk tolerance. The selection of a storage solution should then be based on its ability to demonstrably meet these identified requirements, with a clear understanding of the trade-offs between cost, performance, and security. Regular review and auditing of the implemented solution are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 8. Examination of the data shows a significant increase in unusual network traffic patterns and reports of system slowdowns across multiple departments, strongly suggesting a potential malware propagation event. The IT security team has identified suspicious processes running on several workstations. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to manage this situation in compliance with security and data protection principles? Option A. Shut down all company servers and workstations to prevent any further potential damage, and wait for a third-party security firm to provide guidance before resuming operations. Option B. Immediately isolate all affected network segments and systems to contain the spread. Initiate a forensic investigation to determine the nature and scope of the malware, and assess if personal data has been compromised to trigger appropriate notification procedures. Option C. Focus solely on eradicating the suspicious processes identified on the workstations, and then proceed with routine system updates without further investigation or notification. Option D. Continue normal operations while monitoring the suspicious activity, assuming it is a minor issue that will resolve itself, and only investigate if user complaints become widespread. The correct answer is B. Immediately isolate all affected network segments and systems to contain the spread. Initiate a forensic investigation to determine the nature and scope of the malware, and assess if personal data has been compromised to trigger appropriate notification procedures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity where an organization must respond to a potential malware outbreak while adhering to regulatory compliance. The difficulty lies in balancing the immediate need to contain and eradicate the threat with the legal and ethical obligations to protect sensitive data and inform affected parties. Missteps can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The pressure to act quickly must be tempered by a methodical, compliant approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted response that prioritizes containment, investigation, and remediation, all while maintaining strict adherence to relevant data protection regulations. This includes isolating affected systems to prevent further propagation, conducting a thorough forensic investigation to understand the scope and origin of the malware, and implementing robust security measures to prevent recurrence. Crucially, this approach mandates compliance with data breach notification requirements, which involve assessing whether personal data has been compromised, and, if so, notifying affected individuals and relevant authorities within stipulated timeframes. This aligns with the principles of data minimization, integrity, and accountability, as well as the proactive and transparent communication expected under regulatory frameworks designed to protect individuals' privacy and security. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately shutting down all systems without a proper investigation. This can lead to significant business disruption and may not effectively address the root cause if the malware is sophisticated or has spread beyond easily identifiable systems. Ethically and regulatorily, this approach fails to demonstrate due diligence in investigating the incident and could lead to unnecessary data loss or corruption. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the incident, hoping it will resolve itself or that it does not involve sensitive data. This is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to security and privacy, directly contravening the principles of data protection and potentially leading to significant penalties if a breach is later discovered. It also fails to protect individuals from potential harm resulting from compromised data. A third incorrect approach is to only focus on technical eradication without considering data breach notification obligations. If the malware has accessed or exfiltrated personal data, failing to notify affected individuals and authorities as required by law is a direct violation of data protection regulations. This can result in substantial fines and legal repercussions, and it erodes trust by withholding critical information from those whose data has been put at risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should follow a structured incident response plan that incorporates regulatory compliance. This plan should include steps for identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. Key component is a clear understanding of the organization's legal obligations regarding data breaches, including notification timelines and requirements. Regular training and tabletop exercises are essential to ensure the team is prepared to execute this plan effectively and compliantly. Decision-making should be guided by a risk-based approach, prioritizing the protection of individuals and the organization's legal standing. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that an organization is experiencing challenges in consistently protecting sensitive customer data due to a lack of standardized procedures. The IT security team has proposed several approaches to address this. Which approach best optimizes information classification and handling procedures to ensure regulatory compliance and minimize risk? Option A. Focus solely on deploying advanced encryption technologies across all data repositories, assuming this will inherently secure all information regardless of its classification. Option B. Prioritize making all company data easily accessible to all employees to foster collaboration, with minimal restrictions on data movement and sharing. Option C. Implement a comprehensive data classification policy that assigns sensitivity levels to all data types and defines specific handling, storage, and disposal procedures for each level, coupled with mandatory employee training. Option D. Develop a simplified data handling guideline that emphasizes general security best practices without specific classification levels, trusting employees to exercise discretion. The correct answer is C. Implement a comprehensive data classification policy that assigns sensitivity levels to all data types and defines specific handling, storage, and disposal procedures for each level, coupled with mandatory employee training. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient data processing with stringent regulatory requirements for handling sensitive information. Organizations must implement robust information classification and handling procedures to prevent data breaches and comply with legal obligations. The challenge lies in creating processes that are both effective in protecting data and practical for day-to-day operations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of information security and compliance. Establishing clear classification levels and defining specific handling procedures for each level, an organization creates a structured framework for data protection. This aligns with the fundamental tenets of data governance and risk management, ensuring that sensitive information is treated with the appropriate level of security throughout its life cycle. This proactive and systematic method minimizes the likelihood of unauthorized access, disclosure, or modification, thereby upholding regulatory compliance and maintaining stakeholder trust. An incorrect approach that fails to define clear classification levels and handling procedures is professionally unacceptable. This oversight creates ambiguity, leading to inconsistent application of security controls. It increases the risk of sensitive data being mishandled, potentially resulting in regulatory violations, fines, and reputational damage. Without defined procedures, employees may not understand their responsibilities regarding data protection, making them vulnerable to social engineering or accidental data leaks. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on technical controls without documented procedures is also professionally deficient. While technical controls are crucial, they are most effective when integrated into a comprehensive security program that includes clear policies and procedures. Relying only on technology leaves gaps in accountability and human oversight, which are essential for effective information handling. This can lead to situations where technical safeguards are bypassed or misconfigured due to a lack of clear guidance. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes data accessibility over security for all information types is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the principle of least privilege and the need to protect sensitive data from unauthorized access. It directly contravenes the spirit and letter of data protection regulations, which mandate appropriate security measures based on the sensitivity of the data. Such a lax attitude towards security can lead to severe consequences, including data breaches and loss of public confidence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment to identify sensitive data, followed by the development of a tiered classification system. This system should be supported by clearly documented handling procedures that outline storage, transmission, access, and disposal requirements for each classification level. Regular training and awareness programs for employees are also critical to ensure adherence to these procedures. Finally, periodic reviews and updates to the classification and handling policies are necessary to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. Question 10. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a senior IT administrator requires elevated privileges to troubleshoot a critical production system issue that is impacting customer service. The administrator has requested full administrative access to the affected system for an indefinite period to ensure they can resolve the problem efficiently. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Deny the administrator's request for full administrative access, citing organizational policy, and inform them that no elevated privileges can be granted. Option B. Create a new, custom administrative role specifically for this administrator that grants them broad access to all production systems to be used for future troubleshooting. Option C. Grant the administrator full administrative access to the affected system for an indefinite period to ensure the issue is resolved quickly. Option D. Grant the administrator the minimum necessary permissions required to diagnose and resolve the specific issue, with access time-bound and subject to audit. The correct answer is C. Grant the administrator full administrative access to the affected system for an indefinite period to ensure the issue is resolved quickly. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical and security challenge where a well-intentioned but potentially overreaching request for access conflicts with the principle of least privilege and data privacy. The challenge lies in balancing the need for operational efficiency and support with the imperative to protect sensitive information from unauthorized access, even from within the organization. The request, if granted without proper justification and controls, could lead to a breach of compliance and erode trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the access request against established access control policies and the principle of least privilege. This means granting only the minimum permissions necessary for the user to perform their specific documented task. If the request is for broad administrative access, it should be challenged and refined to a more granular level. This aligns with best practices in identity and access management, emphasizing justification, time-bound access, and regular auditing. In the context of the Microsoft Certified Security, Compliance, and Identity Fundamentals exam, this reflects adherence to security principles that underpin compliance with various regulations. Though specific regulations are not named for this exam, the principles are universal. Incorrect approaches analysis. Granting broad administrative access without sufficient justification or granular controls represents a significant security and ethical failure. It violates the principle of least privilege, increasing the attack surface and the risk of accidental or malicious data exposure. This approach is professionally unacceptable as it prioritizes convenience over security and compliance. Implementing a blanket policy that denies all such requests, regardless of legitimate business need, is also professionally unsound. While it errs on the side of caution, it hinders operational effectiveness and can lead to frustration and workarounds that bypass security controls entirely. This approach fails to acknowledge the legitimate needs of the organization and its employees. Creating a custom, one-off access role for this specific request without proper documentation, review, or integration into the broader access control framework is risky. It can lead to an unmanageable sprawl of permissions, making auditing and revocation difficult, and potentially creating security gaps over time. This approach lacks the systematic rigor required for robust identity and access management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach access requests by first understanding the business justification. This involves asking clarifying questions about the specific tasks the user needs to perform and the data they need to access. Next, they should consult existing access control policies and role definitions. If existing roles do not meet the need, the principle of least privilege should guide the creation of a new, narrowly defined role or the assignment of specific permissions. Documentation, approval workflows, and time-bound access are crucial components of this process. Regular review and auditing of access rights are essential to maintain a secure and compliant environment. Question 11. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a recently deployed web application exhibits several critical vulnerabilities, including SQL injection and cross-site scripting XSS flaws. These vulnerabilities could allow unauthorized access to sensitive customer data and enable malicious actors to manipulate user sessions. The development team is eager to release new features, but the security team is concerned about the immediate risks posed by these identified weaknesses. Which of the following actions best addresses the identified application vulnerabilities while balancing security and business needs? Option A. Immediately halt the release of new features and prioritize the remediation of all identified critical vulnerabilities before any further development or deployment. Implement a phased rollout of fixes, starting with the most severe SQL injection flaws, followed by XSS vulnerabilities, with thorough testing at each stage. Option B. Document the vulnerabilities and inform stakeholders of the risks, but allow the development team to proceed with releasing new features, deferring remediation until after the next planned release cycle to avoid disrupting the development roadmap. Option C. Focus on strengthening perimeter security measures, such as web application firewalls, WAF, to block known attack patterns targeting SQL injection and XSS, and allow the development team to proceed with releasing new features. Option D. Apply generic security patches to the application framework and libraries without a detailed analysis of the specific vulnerabilities, assuming this will address the identified issues and allow for continued development. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt the release of new features and prioritize the remediation of all identified critical vulnerabilities before any further development or deployment. Implement a phased rollout of fixes, starting with the most severe SQL injection flaws, followed by XSS vulnerabilities, with thorough testing at each stage. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new features with the imperative to maintain a secure application environment. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating application vulnerabilities without unduly hindering business agility or introducing new risks. Careful judgment is required to prioritize remediation efforts based on the severity and exploitability of identified vulnerabilities, while also considering the potential impact on business operations and user experience. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified vulnerabilities through a structured and risk-based methodology. This aligns with fundamental security principles of vulnerability management and secure software development lifecycles. By prioritizing the most critical vulnerabilities for immediate remediation and implementing a phased approach for less severe ones, the organization demonstrates a commitment to proactive security. This also aligns with the general principles of responsible data handling and system integrity expected under various compliance frameworks, even if specific regulations are not explicitly named for this exam. The focus on testing and validation before deployment ensures that fixes are effective and do not introduce new issues, a cornerstone of robust IT governance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on patching without understanding the root cause of the vulnerabilities fails to address the underlying insecure coding practices or configuration errors. This can lead to recurring vulnerabilities and a false sense of security. It also risks introducing unintended side effects if patches are applied without thorough testing, potentially impacting application functionality or introducing new security flaws. This approach may also violate ethical obligations to maintain system integrity and protect user data by not fully resolving security weaknesses. Another incorrect approach that delays remediation indefinitely due to resource constraints, while a practical concern, is professionally unacceptable. It demonstrates a failure to adequately prioritize security risks and can lead to significant breaches. This inaction can have severe legal and reputational consequences, as organizations have a duty of care to protect their systems and data. Ethically, it represents a disregard for the potential harm that could befall users or the organization due to known vulnerabilities. A third incorrect approach that relies solely on perimeter defenses to protect against application vulnerabilities overlooks the fact that many application-level attacks bypass traditional network security controls. This is a fundamentally flawed security strategy that leaves the application itself exposed. It fails to meet the professional standard of defense in depth and can be seen as negligent in protecting against known attack vectors. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a continuous cycle of identification, assessment, prioritization, remediation, and verification of vulnerabilities. This process should be informed by threat intelligence, risk appetite, and business objectives. When faced with resource constraints, professionals must advocate for the necessary resources by clearly articulating the risks and potential impact of inaction, rather than compromising on security standards. Question 12. Assessment of a cybersecurity incident response scenario where a user receives an urgent email from what appears to be a senior executive requesting immediate access to a confidential client database to resolve a critical issue. The email contains a link to a secure portal for data retrieval. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the employee to take to prevent a potential social engineering attack? Option A. Immediately forward the email to the IT security department for investigation and verification of the request's legitimacy. Option B. Reply to the email asking for more details about the critical issue before proceeding. Option C. Click the link to the secure portal to access the database and fulfill the executive's request as quickly as possible. Option D. Ignore the email, assuming it is a phishing attempt, and continue with their regular tasks. The correct answer is C. Click the link to the secure portal to access the database and fulfill the executive's request as quickly as possible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity where an employee, under pressure and without proper verification, is asked to perform an action that could compromise sensitive data. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of a request with the critical need for security protocols. Employees are often trained to be helpful and responsive, which can be exploited by social engineers. The requirement for careful judgment stems from the need to identify and resist manipulation while maintaining operational efficiency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multi-layered defense against social engineering. It emphasizes the importance of verifying the identity of the requester through established, out-of-band channels before acting on a request, especially one involving sensitive information or system changes. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for data protection and security. For instance, in the U.S., frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF, and regulations such as HIPAA for healthcare data and GDPR, if applicable to data processing, mandate robust access controls and verification procedures to prevent unauthorized disclosure or modification of sensitive information. Training employees to recognize and report suspicious requests is a cornerstone of a strong security posture, as it empowers individuals to be the first line of defense. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately fulfilling the request due to perceived urgency. This bypasses essential security checks and directly plays into the hands of a social engineer. Ethically and regulatorily, this is a failure because it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting sensitive data, potentially violating data privacy laws and organizational security policies. It shows a disregard for established procedures designed to prevent breaches. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the request entirely without any form of verification or escalation. A caution is good. Outright ignoring a request, especially if it appears to come from a legitimate source, even if impersonated, can disrupt business operations and may lead to missed critical tasks. From a professional standpoint, it indicates a lack of problem-solving skills and an inability to navigate potentially legitimate, albeit suspicious, requests. It also fails to address the potential threat by not reporting or investigating it. A third incorrect approach is to confront the requester aggressively or dismissively. While the request may be malicious, an unprofessional response can escalate the situation unnecessarily and may prevent the organization from gathering information about the attempted attack. Professionally, it demonstrates poor communication skills and a lack of composure under pressure. Ethically, it could be seen as unprofessional conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that prioritizes verification and adherence to established security protocols. When faced with an unusual or urgent request, especially one involving sensitive data or system access, the decision-making process should involve 1. Pause and assess. Recognize the potential for social engineering. 2. Verify identity. Use predefined, secure methods to confirm the requester's identity and authority. 3. Consult policy. Refer to organizational security policies and procedures for handling such requests. 4. Report suspicious activity. If verification fails or the request seems suspicious, report it to the appropriate security team or IT department. 5. Escalate if necessary. If the request is legitimate but requires higher approval, follow the established escalation path. This systematic approach ensures that security is maintained without unduly hindering legitimate business operations, and it aligns with the principles of responsible data stewardship and cybersecurity best practices. Question 13. Comparative studies suggest that organizations often struggle to implement effective data masking and obfuscation techniques that satisfy both data utility and regulatory compliance. Considering the need to protect sensitive customer information while enabling its use for development and testing environments, which of the following approaches best balances these competing requirements and adheres to the principles of data protection? Option A. Applying a simple character substitution cipher to all personally identifiable information fields across all datasets, regardless of the data's sensitivity or intended use. Option B. Implementing a combination of techniques such as data shuffling, data substitution with realistic but fictitious data, and data encryption for highly sensitive fields, ensuring that the chosen methods are context-aware and do not compromise the statistical properties of the data where necessary for analysis. Option C. Removing all columns that contain any form of personal identifier from the datasets before they are used in any non-production environment. Option D. Utilizing a single, generic data masking technique, such as random data generation, uniformly across all data fields in all environments. Correct answer is B. Implementing a combination of techniques such as data shuffling, data substitution with realistic but fictitious data, and data encryption for highly sensitive fields, ensuring that the chosen methods are context-aware and do not compromise the statistical properties of the data where necessary for analysis. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for data utility with stringent data protection requirements, particularly when dealing with sensitive information. Organizations must implement data masking and obfuscation techniques that effectively protect privacy without rendering the data unusable for legitimate business purposes like testing or analytics. Careful judgment is required to select techniques that comply with relevant regulations and maintain data integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a layered strategy that combines multiple techniques tailored to the specific data sensitivity and intended use. This approach ensures that different types of sensitive data are protected appropriately, minimizing the risk of re-identification. It aligns with the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, fundamental to many data protection regulations. By using a combination of techniques, the organization demonstrates a robust commitment to security and compliance, reducing the likelihood of breaches and regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach that relies solely on simple substitution without considering context or data relationships is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to a false sense of security, as sophisticated attackers might still be able to infer original values or re-identify individuals, especially if the substituted data retains patterns or statistical properties of the original. This failure to adequately protect sensitive data constitutes a regulatory failure, potentially violating principles of data security and confidentiality. Another incorrect approach that involves removing all identifying information without any substitution or anonymization is also professionally unacceptable. While it might seem like a strong protection, it can render the data useless for many analytical or testing purposes, defeating the objective of using the data. Furthermore, if the data is still considered personal data, even after removal of direct identifiers, and can be linked back to an individual through other means, it may still fall under regulatory scrutiny. This approach fails to strike the necessary balance between protection and utility. A third incorrect approach that applies the same masking technique uniformly across all data types, regardless of sensitivity, is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to overmasking of less sensitive data, impacting its utility unnecessarily, while potentially undermasking highly sensitive data if the chosen technique is not robust enough for its specific characteristics. This lack of tailored protection is a failure in risk assessment and proportionate security measures, which are often mandated by regulations. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough data inventory and classification to understand what data is being handled and its sensitivity. This should be followed by a risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities. Based on this assessment, appropriate data masking and obfuscation techniques should be selected, considering their effectiveness, impact on data utility, and compliance with relevant regulations. Regular review and testing of these techniques are crucial to ensure their continued effectiveness. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that an organization is considering implementing biometric authentication for accessing sensitive financial data. They are evaluating different biometric methods, including fingerprint scanning, facial recognition, and iris scanning. The primary goal is to enhance security while maintaining a reasonable user experience. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory considerations for implementing biometric authentication in this context? Option A. Implement a multi-factor authentication system where fingerprint scanning is one of the factors, alongside a strong password and a one-time passcode delivered via a trusted device. Biometric data is encrypted at rest and in transit, and users are provided with clear consent forms outlining data usage and retention policies. Option B. Utilize iris scanning for all access, storing the raw iris scan data unencrypted on a central server to facilitate faster processing and retrieval. Option C. Implement fingerprint scanning as the primary authentication method, but disable any fallback or alternative authentication methods to enforce strict adherence to biometric verification. Option D. Deploy facial recognition as the sole authentication method for all access to the financial data system, as it is perceived as the most convenient and technologically advanced option. The correct answer is A. Implement a multi-factor authentication system where fingerprint scanning is one of the factors, alongside a strong password and a one-time passcode delivered via a trusted device. Biometric data is encrypted at rest and in transit, and users are provided with clear consent forms outlining data usage and retention policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in modern identity and access management, balancing robust security with user convenience and privacy. Organizations are increasingly adopting biometric authentication due to its perceived strength and ease of use. However, the implementation requires careful consideration of data privacy regulations, the inherent limitations of biometric technologies, and the potential for bias or error. Professionals must navigate these complexities to ensure compliance, maintain user trust, and effectively secure access to sensitive information. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate biometric method for a given context, understanding its implications, and aligning it with organizational policies and regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a layered security strategy that incorporates biometric authentication as a strong factor, but not the sole determinant of access, especially for highly sensitive resources. It acknowledges that while biometrics offer a high degree of uniqueness, they are not infallible. This approach aligns with best practices for data protection and privacy by ensuring that biometric data is handled securely, with appropriate consent and minimization principles applied. Furthermore, it recognizes the importance of providing alternative authentication methods, which is a critical requirement for accessibility and to mitigate risks associated with biometric failures, e.g., injury, system malfunction, or false positives/negatives. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, ensuring that even if one authentication factor is compromised, others remain to protect the resource. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach relies solely on a single biometric factor for all access levels. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a single point of failure. If the biometric system is compromised or a user's biometric data is somehow spoofed or unavailable, access could be permanently denied or, worse, granted inappropriately. Ethically, it fails to adequately protect user data and access rights by not providing recourse or alternative verification. From a regulatory perspective, depending on the jurisdiction and the sensitivity of the data, this sole reliance might not meet the required standards for data protection and access control, as it lacks the necessary redundancy and fallback mechanisms. Another incorrect approach involves implementing a biometric system without a clear policy on how the biometric data will be stored, protected, and eventually deleted. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Biometric data is considered sensitive personal information, and its mishandling can lead to severe privacy breaches, identity theft, and noncompliance with data protection laws e.g., GDPR, CCPA, depending on the exam's specified jurisdiction. Organizations have a legal and ethical obligation to be transparent about data collection, usage, and retention, and to implement robust security measures to prevent unauthorized access or disclosure. A third incorrect approach is to deploy a biometric system that has not undergone rigorous testing for accuracy and potential bias across diverse user populations. This is professionally unsound and ethically problematic. Biometric systems can exhibit bias, leading to higher false rejection rates for certain demographic groups, thus creating accessibility barriers and potentially discriminatory outcomes. This failure to ensure equitable performance can lead to regulatory scrutiny and reputational damage, as it violates principles of fairness and non-discrimination. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to biometric authentication. This involves 1. Understanding the sensitivity of the resource being protected. 2. Evaluating the specific biometric technologies available, their strengths, weaknesses, and potential for bias. 3. Consulting relevant regulatory frameworks and organizational policies to ensure compliance with data privacy and security requirements. 4. Designing a multi-factor authentication strategy that incorporates biometrics as a strong but not exclusive authentication factor, especially for high-risk access. 5. Establishing clear policies for data handling, consent, and retention of biometric data. 6. Ensuring that chosen biometric systems are tested for accuracy and fairness across all intended user groups. 7. Providing clear communication to users about how their biometric data is used and protected, and offering alternative authentication methods. Question 15. To address the challenge of ensuring data accuracy and detecting accidental or malicious alterations during transmission and storage, which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of data validation and error detection within a U.S. regulatory framework? Option A. Relying solely on user feedback to identify and report any discrepancies in the data. Option B. Employing only basic input validation at the application layer to check data formats. Option C. Utilizing encryption exclusively for all data transmissions to ensure data confidentiality. Option D. Implementing checksums and hashing algorithms to verify data integrity at various points. The correct answer is D. Implementing checksums and hashing algorithms to verify data integrity at various points. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because ensuring data integrity during transmission and storage is a fundamental requirement for regulatory compliance and maintaining trust. Organizations must implement robust mechanisms to detect errors that could lead to incorrect data interpretation, unauthorized access, or noncompliance with data protection laws. The Microsoft Certified Security, Compliance, and Identity Fundamentals exam focuses on foundational principles within a U.S. regulatory context, emphasizing frameworks like NIST and general data protection best practices. The correct approach, implementing checksums and hashing algorithms, represents best professional practice because these methods are widely recognized and effective for data validation. Checksums provide a simple way to detect accidental alterations during transmission, while hashing algorithms offer a more robust mechanism for verifying data integrity and detecting both accidental and malicious modifications. These techniques directly support compliance with regulations that mandate data accuracy and security, such as those requiring accurate record-keeping and protection against unauthorized data alteration. Implementing only basic input validation at the application level is an incorrect approach because it primarily focuses on data format and type, not on detecting errors that may occur during data transfer or storage. While important, it does not address the broader challenge of data integrity across the entire data lifecycle. This failure could lead to non-compliance with regulations requiring assurance of data accuracy throughout its use. Relying solely on user reporting for data errors is an incorrect approach because it is reactive and inefficient. It places the burden of error detection on end users, which is unreliable and can lead to significant delays in identifying and rectifying critical data integrity issues. This approach fails to proactively safeguard data as required by many compliance frameworks, potentially violating principles of due diligence and data stewardship. Using only encryption for data transmission is an incorrect approach because encryption protects data confidentiality and prevents unauthorized viewing, but it does not inherently detect data corruption or alteration. While encryption is a crucial security measure, it does not address the specific requirement of data validation and error detection. A message could be corrupted during transmission even if it is encrypted, and without a validation mechanism, the recipient might process incorrect data, leading to compliance issues. The professional decision-making process should involve understanding the data lifecycle, identifying critical data points, and assessing potential risks to data integrity at each stage. Professionals should then select appropriate technical controls, such as checksums and hashing, that align with regulatory requirements for data accuracy and security. Continuous monitoring and auditing of data integrity mechanisms are also essential to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to evolving threats. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a ransomware attack has been detected on a critical server. The security team is preparing to isolate the affected server and begin eradication. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure both effective incident response and regulatory compliance? Option A. Focus solely on eradicating the ransomware from the affected server and then address documentation and reporting once the system is clean. Option B. Isolate the affected server to prevent further spread, document all containment actions, and initiate the organization's incident response plan, including preliminary notification procedures if required by regulations. Option C. Proceed with containment and eradication without immediate documentation, assuming that detailed logs will be generated by security tools later. Option D. Immediately begin a full forensic analysis of the affected server to understand the attack vector before any containment actions are taken. The correct answer is D. Immediately begin a full forensic analysis of the affected server to understand the attack vector before any containment actions are taken. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity compliance, balancing rapid incident response with thorough, auditable documentation. The pressure to quickly contain a suspected ransomware attack, coupled with the need to satisfy regulatory reporting requirements, creates a high-stakes environment where decisions have significant legal and operational consequences. The challenge lies in ensuring that immediate actions do not compromise the integrity of evidence or violate reporting timelines mandated by relevant regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment and evidence preservation while initiating the documented reporting process. This aligns with best practices for incident response, which emphasize minimizing damage and preventing further compromise. Crucially, it also adheres to regulatory frameworks that often require prompt notification of data breaches or significant security incidents. Documenting all actions taken, even those performed under pressure, is essential for demonstrating due diligence, facilitating post-incident analysis, and satisfying audit requirements. This approach balances operational urgency with legal and compliance obligations, representing a robust and defensible strategy. Incorrect approach is analysis. Focusing solely on eradication without immediate documentation risks losing critical forensic data, which could hinder investigation and violate evidence preservation requirements. This approach may also delay necessary regulatory notifications. Prioritizing extensive forensic analysis before containment could allow the ransomware to spread further, increasing the impact and potentially violating data protection obligations. Furthermore, delaying reporting beyond mandated timelines, even for the sake of thoroughness, is a direct regulatory failure. Attempting to remediate without involving security and compliance teams creates a siloed response, increasing the risk of overlooking critical compliance steps and potentially leading to inconsistent or incomplete reporting. This fragmented approach undermines the organization's overall security posture and compliance framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a structured incident response framework. This involves 1. Initial assessment and containment to limit the spread and impact. 2. Evidence preservation and collection, ensuring the integrity of data for forensic analysis. 3. Communication and notification, adhering to all regulatory timelines and requirements. 4. Eradication and recovery, removing the threat and restoring systems. 5. Post-incident review and lessons learned to improve future responses. Throughout this process, meticulous documentation is paramount, serving as the backbone for compliance, legal defense, and continuous improvement. Question 17. The control framework reveals that a significant distributed denial of service (DDoS) attack is underway, targeting the organization's primary customer-facing web portal. The attack is causing intermittent service disruptions and slow response times for legitimate users. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate initial response from a security and compliance perspective? Option A. Issue a public statement to customers acknowledging the attack and assuring them that all necessary steps are being taken, without detailing the specific impact or mitigation efforts. Option B. Deploy aggressive, network-wide traffic filtering and blocking measures to stop all suspicious traffic immediately, regardless of potential impact on legitimate users. Option C. Monitor the attack passively and wait for it to subside naturally, assuming that the organization's existing infrastructure can withstand the load over time. Option D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to understand which critical business functions and customer data are affected, and to what degree, before deploying broad mitigation strategies. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive impact assessment to understand which critical business functions and customer data are affected, and to what degree, before deploying broad mitigation strategies. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a rapid and accurate assessment of the impact of a DDoS attack on critical business functions, while simultaneously considering regulatory compliance and the ethical obligation to protect customer data and service availability. The pressure of an ongoing attack necessitates swift decision-making that balances immediate mitigation with long-term strategic responses. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes understanding the business impact before implementing solutions. This aligns with the principles of risk management and business continuity, which are fundamental to maintaining operational resilience and meeting regulatory expectations for service availability and data protection. By assessing the impact on critical services and data, an organization can prioritize mitigation efforts, allocate resources effectively, and communicate appropriately with stakeholders, thereby minimizing reputational damage and potential financial losses. This proactive and impact-driven methodology is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and adherence to compliance frameworks that mandate robust incident response and business continuity planning. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical mitigation without understanding the business impact is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to misallocation of resources, addressing non-critical systems while critical ones remain vulnerable, or implementing solutions that are overly disruptive to legitimate users. Ethically, this could result in a failure to protect customer access to essential services. From a regulatory perspective, such an approach might violate requirements for maintaining service availability and demonstrating effective incident response, potentially leading to penalties. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate public disclosure without a clear understanding of the attack scope or impact is also professionally unsound. This can cause undue panic among customers and stakeholders, damage the organization's reputation, and potentially alert attackers to the organization's defensive strategies. Ethically, it represents a failure to provide accurate and timely information. Regulatory frameworks often require timely notification, but this must be balanced with the need for factual accuracy and a controlled communication strategy. A third incorrect approach that involves ignoring the attack until it subsides is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of preparedness and a disregard for the organization's responsibilities to its customers and stakeholders. It directly contravenes the principles of incident response and business continuity, which are often mandated by regulations to ensure the protection of services and data. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response plan. This plan should include clear roles and responsibilities, communication protocols, and predefined impact assessment criteria. When an incident occurs, the first step is to activate the incident response team. This team should then follow established procedures to identify the nature and scope of the attack, assess its impact on critical business functions and data, and then implement appropriate mitigation and recovery strategies. Communication with relevant stakeholders, including customers and regulatory bodies, should be managed according to the incident response plan, ensuring accuracy and timeliness. Question 18. Operational review demonstrates that several laptops containing sensitive customer information have been stolen from a company's unsecure storage facility. The IT security team is aware of the theft but has not yet initiated formal incident response procedures or notified any external parties. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the IT security team to take, considering U.S. regulatory frameworks? Option A. Delay formal incident response and external notifications while the team attempts to recover the stolen hardware and conduct an internal investigation to determine if any data was actually accessed. Option B. Focus solely on locating and recovering the stolen laptops, assuming that the data on them was adequately protected by encryption and therefore poses no immediate risk. Option C. Treat the incident as a minor loss and await further developments, as the primary concern is the physical loss of assets rather than a confirmed data breach. Option D. Immediately initiate the organization's data breach incident response plan, including assessing the scope of the data compromise, securing any remaining affected systems, and preparing for required notifications to regulatory bodies and affected individuals. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate the organization's data breach incident response plan, including assessing the scope of the data compromise, securing any remaining affected systems, and preparing for required notifications to regulatory bodies and affected individuals. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the immediate and potentially severe consequences of hardware theft, including the compromise of sensitive data. The challenge lies in balancing the need for swift action to mitigate damage with the requirement to adhere to established incident response protocols and legal obligations. The potential for reputational damage, regulatory fines, and loss of customer trust necessitates a carefully considered and well-executed response. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment and notification, aligning with best practices for data breach response. In the context of U.S. regulations relevant to the Microsoft Certified Security, Compliance, and Identity Fundamentals exam, this typically involves following established incident response plans that mandate prompt assessment of the breach's scope and impact. This includes securing any remaining affected systems, initiating forensic analysis to understand the extent of the compromise, and notifying relevant parties, e.g., affected individuals, regulatory bodies, as required by laws like the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, or the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, depending on the nature of the data and the organization's location and operations. This proactive and transparent approach minimizes further harm and demonstrates a commitment to compliance and stakeholder protection. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying notification to regulatory bodies and affected individuals while attempting to fully resolve the issue internally. This failure to adhere to mandated reporting timelines, as stipulated by various U.S. data breach notification laws, can result in significant penalties and legal repercussions. It also erodes trust by withholding critical information from those who have a right to know. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on recovering the stolen hardware without adequately assessing the data compromise. While hardware recovery is important, the primary concern in such a theft is the potential exfiltration and misuse of sensitive data. Neglecting a thorough data breach investigation and remediation plan, including data encryption status and access logs, leaves the organization vulnerable to ongoing threats and further exploitation. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the incident as a minor loss without proper investigation, assuming the data was not sensitive or encrypted. This underestimation of risk is a critical failure. Regulatory frameworks often require organizations to treat all potential data breaches seriously until proven otherwise. A lack of due diligence in assessing the impact of stolen hardware can lead to non-compliance with data protection regulations and significant unforeseen consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response framework. This involves 1. Immediate containment and assessment of the incident, 2. Activation of the incident response team, 3. Thorough investigation to determine the scope and impact of the breach, 4. Timely notification to all required parties, and 5. Post-incident review and remediation to prevent recurrence. Adherence to established policies and regulatory requirements is paramount throughout this process. Question 19. Consider a scenario where a company has recently experienced a series of targeted phishing attacks that have led to minor data breaches. The IT security team has decided to implement an intrusion detection and prevention system, ID/IPS, to enhance their defenses. What is the most effective and professionally sound approach to deploying this new system to minimize disruption while maximizing security benefits? Option A. Implement only signature-based detection rules within the IDS/IPS, focusing on known threat patterns. Option B. Deploy the IDS/IPS in monitoring-only mode initially to observe network traffic and identify potential false positives before enabling blocking capabilities. Option C. Configure the IDS/IPS with overly aggressive blocking rules to proactively prevent any suspicious activity, even if it means some legitimate traffic might be affected. Option D. Immediately deploy the IDS/IPS in full blocking mode across all network segments to ensure all malicious traffic is stopped instantly. The correct answer is B. Deploy the IDS/IPS in monitoring-only mode initially to observe network traffic and identify potential false positives before enabling blocking capabilities. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term security posture of the organization. A rushed deployment of an IDS/IPS without proper planning can lead to significant disruption, false positives, and ultimately, a weakened security stance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen solution effectively addresses the identified threats without creating new vulnerabilities or hindering legitimate business processes. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, risk-based implementation. This aligns with the principles of responsible security management, emphasizing thorough analysis and validation before full deployment. By starting with a monitoring-only mode, the organization can gather data on normal network traffic and identify potential false positives without impacting network availability. This iterative process allows for tuning of the IDS/IPS rules, ensuring that only genuine threats trigger alerts or blocking actions. This methodical approach minimizes disruption and maximizes the effectiveness of the security controls, adhering to the spirit of due diligence expected in security operations. An incorrect approach that immediately deploys the IDS/IPS in blocking mode without prior analysis is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. From a regulatory perspective, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in implementing security measures, potentially violating compliance requirements that mandate effective risk management and incident prevention. Ethically, it prioritizes speed over thoroughness, risking business disruption and potentially leading to the blocking of legitimate traffic, which can have severe financial and reputational consequences for the organization. This demonstrates a failure to adequately assess the impact of security controls on business operations. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on signature-based detection without considering anomaly-based detection, is also professionally flawed. While signature-based detection is crucial for identifying known threats, it leaves the organization vulnerable to zero-day attacks and novel threats. This oversight represents a failure to implement a comprehensive security strategy, potentially violating regulatory expectations for robust threat detection capabilities. Ethically, it exposes the organization to risks that could have been mitigated with a more holistic approach. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes identifying critical assets, understanding potential threats, and evaluating existing security controls. For IDS/IPS deployment, this translates to defining clear objectives, selecting appropriate technologies, planning for phased implementation, monitoring, alerting, then blocking, establishing clear incident response procedures, and ensuring continuous monitoring and tuning. Professionals should always consider the potential impact on business operations and prioritize solutions that offer a balance between security and functionality, guided by established security frameworks and best practices. Question 20. The investigation demonstrates a suspicious network traffic pattern originating from an external IP address targeting a critical server. The security team has received an automated alert indicating a potential brute force attack. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the security team to take? Option A. Temporarily disable user accounts that have recently accessed the targeted server to prevent further unauthorized access. Option B. Immediately block the external IP address at the firewall and isolate the targeted server from the network. Option C. Initiate a full system scan of the targeted server and all connected systems to identify any existing malware. Option D. Review the alert details, correlate with other security logs, and consult the incident response plan before taking definitive action. The correct answer is B. Immediately block the external IP address at the firewall and isolate the targeted server from the network. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity, responding to a detected security threat while balancing operational continuity and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying the nature and scope of the threat, determining the appropriate response without causing undue disruption, and ensuring that all actions align with relevant security principles and potential regulatory obligations. The need for swift action must be tempered by a thorough understanding of the potential impact on data integrity, confidentiality, and availability, as well as the organization's duty to protect sensitive information. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based response. By initiating a detailed incident response plan, The organization ensures that actions are coordinated, documented, and aligned with established security protocols. This methodical process allows for accurate threat assessment, containment, eradication, and recovery, minimizing potential damage. Furthermore, adhering to a documented plan demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to security best practices, which is crucial for maintaining trust and meeting any implicit or explicit regulatory expectations regarding incident handling and data protection. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, unverified system shutdown without a clear understanding of the threat's impact is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to significant business disruption, data loss, and reputational damage, all of which could have regulatory implications if sensitive data is compromised or if the organization fails to meet its service level agreements. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the alert due to perceived low risk without proper validation, represents a failure in due diligence and a disregard for potential vulnerabilities. This could lead to a more severe breach later, with significant legal and financial repercussions. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical remediation without considering the broader impact on users or data, overlooks the holistic nature of security and compliance. This can result in incomplete solutions that leave the organization exposed to further risks or non-compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with threat identification and assessment, followed by the activation of a predefined incident response plan. This plan should outline steps for containment, eradication, and recovery, with clear roles and responsibilities. Throughout the process, documentation is critical for auditing and post-incident analysis. The decision to escalate or take more drastic measures should be based on the assessed severity and potential impact of the threat, always considering the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations.